Welcome back to the Injury Prone Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Edwin Porras, Dr. Physical Therapy, Medical Analyst, FantasyPoints.com. Gracias por tus oídos. Make sure you follow us on the old Twitter sphere, X, whatever you want to call it. Maybe I'll join Blue Sky. I know that's the trend right now, but my X right now, @FTheInjuryDoc. If you haven't heard, make sure you are going to FantasyPoints.com and reading all of these injury insights for free. Today, I want to talk about Nico Collins, George Kittle, DK Metcalf. And I want to talk about Nico. I don't want to start there, but we obviously have two tight ends that are glaringly obviously out. That's Sam LaPorta and Dawson Knox. Make sure you go back to the previous episode, listen to what I had to say there. Go to fantasypoints.com, look at my projections for when they'll be back, but both of those guys ruled out. But Nico Collins, I'm going to give you the big picture data, and then I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to tell you what to do with Nico Collins. So Nico Collins got activated last week, didn't play. He's been out with a hamstring strain. Initially projected him for week 11, 12 return. Here we are, week 11, and he's coming back. So after hamstring strains, the re-injury rate is really high, right? What you also have is the stud rate and the dud rate, which if you are, a buyer of the Injury Prone Draft Guide and Playbook, you know what the stud and the dud rates are. Stud rate, essentially, you score 150% or higher of your average. Dud rate, you score 50% or lower of your average. So the stud rate and the dud rates are essentially equal, right? Now, a weak winner rate, I actually said this backwards, I apologize. A stud rate is just 90% or better. A weak winner rate is 150% or better, right? So their weak winner rate in wide receivers after a hamstring strain is about 18%. That's relatively low. You have other injuries that have 25, 30% of a weak winner rate, but for these wide receiver injuries, it sits around 18%, right? So in other words, I gave you a ton of data. Basically, wide receivers after a hamstring strain, their first week back, they're boom or bust. If this were a guy like Christian Watson, if this were a guy like in the past, blast from the past, Will Fuller, right? I would say boom or bust. Put him in a tournament in DFS. Probably don't really want to play him unless you need a Hail Mary on a Monday night. Nico Collins is obviously different. Nico Collins is a stud. Nico Collins is the proverbial straw that makes that offense turn. He still is susceptible to re-injury risk. That doesn't change. But he's not really a guy you can sit in these season-long lineups unless you have, a juggernaut of a team sitting in an 8-person league or something like that. Maybe even a 10-person league. You're sitting pretty with your wide receivers. Anything 12-team or above, you have to put in Nico Collins into your lineup, understanding that he is a power law player, or he is at least ascending to be a power law player. So hopefully at the beginning, I still worry about the re-injury rate. I know that's what I said initially when he injured his hamstring, but if you have him at this point, he's a boom bust. He's a high risk, but you got to play him in most spots. George Kittle. In the Injury Prone Draft Guide and Playbook, I don't assess tight ends. We don't have a tight end section. The reason for that is because forever, tight ends are essentially, they're healthy, they're playing, or they're not. And that's because most tight ends are either going to give you anywhere from 5 to 6 points, 5 to 8 points, or you're going to get, a touchdown, right? Which obviously bumps you to the 12, 13, 14 point range. Like you're either going to get 5 points or you're going to get 15 points on average. That's the bell curve. So if most tight ends are like that, the way I view tight ends is I might as well give myself a shot at a blow-up game. And that's what George Kittle gives you. He's coming back. Well, not really coming back, but he's dealing with his hamstring strain. So again, re-injury is still a concern. But if you're sitting there staring at Dalton Schultz versus George Kittle, I mean, you got to go George Kittle. If you're sitting there George Kittle versus basically the field, most of the tight end field, you're probably going to have to go George Kittle there. Yes, you have a re-injury risk with the soft tissue stuff he's been dealing with, but listen, Brock Purdy throws him a ball in the end zone. He's probably going to come down with it. DK Metcalf, coming back from this knee issue. So they've given him plenty of time. It was a really weird mechanism. He landed. It didn't have, there was non-contact. He hurt the MCL. It's just one of those things where he took enough time, right? If we assume this is just a grade 1 and it wasn't severe, this has been plenty of time for DK Metcalf. What you see after a knee injury is that there's a moderate risk for re-injury with these guys. But the production, it doesn't really take a big hit. So if you have DK Metcalf in most leagues, you're probably throwing him out there. that is it for week 11. Make sure you follow on Twitter at FBInjuryDoc. Let me know if you have any questions. Shout me out there. Good luck.